Two grandmothers disappeared into a name. That is where the story of Amelia Earhart actually begins. It does not start with a plane or a runway. It starts with a deliberate decision made by a family that wanted to secure its memory against time. The family custom was specific. The parents did not choose names based on what sounded pretty. They built a living record. They took the name Amelia from the maternal grandmother, Amelia Josephine Otis. They took the name Mary from the paternal grandmother, Mary Wells Earhart. They combined them into Amelia Mary Earhart. This was not an accident. It was a protocol. Families in that era understood that history often erases women. Surnames change with marriage. Records get lost. A woman's identity can vanish from the legal paper trail in a single generation. The Earhart family solved this engineering problem with a naming rule. By embedding both grandmothers into the child's first and middle names, they created a link that documents could not easily break. Amelia carried this dual memorial every time she signed a paper. She was a walking archive of two different lineages. On one side, she carried the Earhart line. On the other, she carried the Otis line. These were not just names. They were two different worlds that collided to make her existence possible. The Otis world was built on a hill in Atchison, Kansas. Her maternal grandfather, Alfred Gideon Otis, was the architect of that world. The records describe him with titles that radiate stability. He was a former judge in Kansas. He was the president of the Atchison Savings Bank. He was widely regarded as a leading citizen. These titles tell you exactly how he operated. A judge is a man who enforces rules. A bank president is a man who controls resources. A leading citizen is a man who expects the community to listen when he speaks. He lived in a house that matched this status. It was a prominent home, known locally as the Otis House. It stood as a stable coordinate in the town, a place that signaled permanence and power. For a child growing up in its shadow, this house was not just a building. It was an environment shaped by institutions. The people inside it discussed bank boards, legal decisions, and civic management. They lived by schedules and obligations. They understood that a family maintains its position by guarding its boundaries. But boundaries are tested by people. The test came when Alfred's daughter, Amy, wanted to marry a man named Edwin Earhart. The judge looked at Edwin and saw a mistake. He opposed the marriage. His reasons were not vague feelings. They were calculated assessments of risk. The records list his objections clearly, and they reveal how a patriarch analyzes the future. First, Edwin was poor. He was a young lawyer who had not yet secured a fortune. To a bank president, lack of capital is a warning light. It signals that a household will be vulnerable to shocks. Second, Edwin was culturally different. The Otis family moved in Episcopal circles. In that time and place, the Episcopal Church was often the gathering ground for the established English-speaking elite. Edwin came from a Lutheran background. His family had roots in the German-American community. In the social map of late 19th century Kansas, that was a different zone. It implied a different set of networks, a different history, and a status that the judge considered lower than his own. The judge predicted that this mismatch would cause trouble. He worried that the union would drag his daughter's social standing down. He saw the marriage as a breach of the wall he had built around his family's reputation. Amy and Edwin married anyway. They did not surrender to the judge's verdict, but they did compromise with his power. They held the wedding in the Otis family's Episcopal church. Edwin even joined Episcopal congregations later in life. They tried to fit their relationship into the symbolic framework that the judge understood. They walked through the door, but the tension remained in the room. Biographical accounts describe their early married life as marked by the gap between high expectations and modest reality. They lived under the watch of a father-in-law who had already decided they were unstable. The judge turned out to be right about the instability, even if he was wrong to try to control the choice. The decline did not happen all at once. It happened slowly through a series of cracks in the foundation. Edwin Earhart struggled to hold his ground. The records describe a slide driven by alcohol and professional failure. By 1914, his career hit a wall. He had a job with the railroad, but the company forced him to retire. The specific phrase, "forced to retire," does not suggest a happy ending. It implies he was pushed out. He tried to fix it. He went to treatment for his drinking. He tried to get the position back, but the job was gone and it stayed gone. The income that sustained the family evaporated. This is where Amelia's life shifted from the stable world of her grandfather to the chaotic world of her father. The family began to move. They did not move for adventure. They moved because they had to. They went to St. Paul, Minnesota. Amelia finished high school there, navigating a new city while her father looked for work. Then they went to Springfield, Missouri. Then they went to Chicago. The biographical summaries list these moves as a sequence of failures. Edwin found irregular clerical work, but he could not keep it. The family lived on temporary means, constantly uprooting to chase the next paycheck. Amelia watched the geography of her life fracture. She learned that a home is not a permanent thing. She learned that status can vanish. She saw her mother try to manage a household while the money shrank. The family had one safety net left, but it was tied in knots. When Amelia's maternal grandmother died, the massive Otis estate did not simply flow to her mother. The family placed the estate in a trust. The legal documents were explicit about why. The trust was designed to protect the assets from Edwin's drinking. The money was there, but it was locked behind a legal wall to keep it safe from the father's habits. Then came the final break. The family auctioned the contents of the Otis house in Atchison. The fortress was dismantled. Strangers bought the furniture and the memories. Amelia watched it happen. She later described that auction with a brutal phrase. She called it the end of my childhood. Later, even the remnants of that wealth eroded. A venture in a gypsum mine failed. The money that was supposed to be protected dwindled away. The family was left with almost nothing. This was the training ground of the pilot. The popular story says she was born to fly. The evidence suggests she was trained to handle turbulence long before she got into a plane. She learned to adapt because she had no other choice. She learned to pack up, move on, and start over in a new place without complaining. The instability of her teenage years forced her to build a kind of internal armor. But while the money was disappearing, the lineage remained. The family had lost the bank account, but they still had the map of where they came from. That map stretched back much further than the Kansas judge. The records connect Amelia Earhart to a specific passenger on the Mayflower. His name was Richard Warren. He sailed to Plymouth Colony in 1620. Most people think of the Mayflower as a group of families arriving together. The records show that Richard Warren traveled alone. He left his wife and 5 daughters behind in England. He crossed the ocean by himself to see if the settlement would work. It was a calculated risk. He established a foothold first, and his family followed him later. This details reveals a strategy of staggered migration. The family did not expose everyone to the danger at once. One person took the lead. The others waited for the signal. It was a survival tactic used by people facing the unknown. The genealogical charts list Amelia as Richard Warren's 8th great-granddaughter. The link is described as a confirmed direct line in tables that track Mayflower descendants. It connects the 20th century aviator to the 17th century pioneer through a single chain of parents and children. That chain did not stay in Plymouth. The Warren family line moved across the continent. They settled in New England. Then they moved to New York. Then they pushed into the Midwest. Finally, later ancestors reached Kansas and Missouri. The path was a long trajectory of resettlement. Generation after generation decided to leave the known world and try a new one. Amelia was the product of this motion. Her people were not static. They were movers. The restlessness that defined her adult life was already written in the migration patterns of her ancestors. There is another layer to the ancestry that is often misunderstood. The charts also link Amelia Earhart to famous Revolutionary War figures. The names John Hancock and William Ellery appear in her family tree. Both men signed the Declaration of Independence. When readers see these names, they usually assume Amelia was their direct descendant. They imagine a straight line from the signer's desk to the pilot's cockpit. The data corrects this assumption. The records state she was related to them, not lineally descended from them. This is where the structure of colonial families becomes important. In early New England, the population was small. A few distinct families settled the region. They had large numbers of children, and those children married the neighbors. Over 3 or 4 generations, these families became a dense web. Everyone was connected to everyone else through a mesh of marriages. Amelia's connection to Hancock and Ellery works through this web. She shared early colonial ancestors with them. They all came from the same stock, the original group of families that founded the colonies. The charts highlight the Hingham-Lincoln line as a key branch in this network. This line started with Samuel Weaver Lincoln, an immigrant who arrived in the 1600s. Amos Lincoln, a man who participated in the Boston Tea Party, also came from this line. Amelia and Amos were not father and granddaughter. They were distant cousins who shared the same deep roots. They sat on different branches of the same massive tree. This network connection is actually more revealing than a simple straight line. It shows that Amelia belonged to a broad population of early Americans. She was part of the system that built the country, linked by blood and marriage to the people who wrote the documents and fought the wars. She was a cousin to the Revolution. There is one more strand in the braid, and it is quieter than the others. It comes from the maternal side, through the Otis line, but further back. The records point to a man named Gebhard Harris. He was Amelia's great-grandfather. He was the German immigrant whose daughter married the judge. The descriptions of him are very specific. They call him a devout Lutheran layman and an active church worker. The word layman is important. It means he was not a professional pastor. He did not have a title. He was an ordinary man who did the work. He helped build the congregation through steady, unpaid participation. The sources emphasize his posture of steady participation and his role as a respected patriarch. This is a different kind of influence. It is not the power of a bank president or a judge. It is the power of presence. Gebhard Harris shaped his family's values by showing up. He created a religious environment that defined the Otis Harris household for a generation. It was a culture of reliability and community service. Later, the Earhart family moved away from this strict Lutheran identity. They drifted toward more liberal Protestant practices or stopped attending as regularly. But the pattern had already been set. The family knew how to build institutions because they had watched Gebhard Harris do it. All of these lines converged in Amelia. She had the naming protocol that preserved her grandmother's. She had the institutional awareness of the Otis judge. She had the migration instinct of the Mayflower passenger. She had the community discipline of the Lutheran layman, and she had the hard reality of her father's failure. The collapse of the family fortune was the final piece of her education. It stripped away the safety that her grandfather had tried to guarantee. When the money was gone, Amelia had to navigate the world on her own terms. She did not sit down and wait for a rescue. She finished high school in the middle of the moves. She absorbed the shock of the auction. She watched her parents struggle and learned exactly what happens when you lose control of your own resources. This experience changed how she engaged with the world. She did not look for a fortress. She looked for a machine she could control. The records show her navigating the decline with a kind of grim improvisation. She lived through the period of temporary or modest means without breaking. She accepted the reality of the shrinking financial orbit. She saw that the trust fund was a legal cage, not a help. She saw that the old stock status of her grandfather meant nothing if you could not pay the rent. She emerged from this chaos with a very specific set of skills. She knew how to pack. She knew how to leave. She knew how to start over. She knew that the only thing you really own is your ability to handle the unexpected. When she eventually turned toward aviation, she was not running away from a safe home. She was leaving a home that had already dissolved. The air offered something the ground never did, a place where the rules were physics, not social status. The records of her ancestry tell us who she was related to. They list the judge, the pilgrim, the layman, and the signers. They map the network of cousins and the path of migration. But the record of her early life tells us who she actually became. She was the daughter of a crash. She was a woman who lost her childhood at an auction block and decided to build a life that could not be sold off. She took the name of her grandmother's and the grit of her survival and carried them both into the sky.